Long before the pyramids pierced the Egyptian sky, before the Parthenon stood in silent majesty over Athens, and long before even the first stories of Homer were sung across ancient Greece, there existed a tale so old, so profound, that it predates much of recorded history. It is a story of kings and gods, of friendship and loss, of quests that reach beyond mortality itself. This is the story of Gilgamesh, and it is considered the world's first epic. Yet, despite its age and significance, the story has always been shrouded in mystery, whispered across millennia in broken fragments and faded clay tablets, almost as if the past itself were reluctant to reveal it fully. The Epic of Gilgamesh does not come to us whole. It has survived through scattered inscriptions on cuneiform tablets discovered in the deserts of Iraq, remnants of a civilization that flourished in the land we now call Mesopotamia. Scholars pieced it together over centuries, tracing its lines across time like archaeologists reconstructing a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting only a part of the original image. And yet, even in its fragmented form, it possesses a power that is undeniable. It speaks not only of kings and battles, gods and monsters, but of the human condition itself, the fear of death, the bonds of friendship, and the ceaseless search for meaning in a world that often seems indifferent. There is something almost conspiratorial about the survival of Gilgamesh. While other ancient tales were rewritten, adapted, or even suppressed to suit the needs of later empires and religions, fragments of Gilgamesh remained hidden in the dust, waiting silently for modern explorers to uncover them. Some historians argue that the epic's wisdom was too dangerous, too revealing of truths that might destabilize conventional narratives of history and divinity. The story challenges the idea that humanity is a passive recipient of fate. Instead, it portrays a world in which kings wrestle with their mortality, where gods are flawed, and where the pursuit of knowledge, often forbidden, is fraught with peril. As we begin this journey into the ancient world, it is worth imagining the first audiences of Gilgamesh. Picture the scribes, bent over clay tablets in the flickering light of oil lamps, etching lines of cuneiform that carry secrets of human ambition and sorrow. Picture the citizens of Uruk, the mighty city ruled by Gilgamesh, listening to the epic recited aloud in the great halls of ziggurats. They would have heard a story of wonder, of adventure, of friendship that transcended even death itself. Yet beneath the surface, there may have been warnings, lessons carefully encoded in myth and allegory. Lessons about power, about the fragility of life, and perhaps even about truths too dangerous to state plainly. The epic itself is more than a story. It is a window into a civilization that has long vanished from the surface of the earth. Sumer, the birthplace of writing, kingship, and urban society, left behind traces of extraordinary knowledge hidden in tablets, ruins, and artifacts. Through Gilgamesh, we can glimpse the values, fears, and aspirations of a people who lived more than 4,000 years ago. The story reminds us that even the mightiest kings are mortal, even the bravest warriors are vulnerable, and that the search for meaning, for immortality, is a pursuit that has haunted humanity for as long as we have had the ability to think, to reflect, and to dream. But perhaps the most compelling mystery is this: why has the story survived at all? Why, among countless other myths, legends, and epics, did Gilgamesh endure the decay of time, the destruction of libraries, and the rise and fall of empires? Some suggest that the epic was preserved because it contains universal truths encoded in metaphor and allegory, truths that still resonate today. Others argue that fragments of the story were deliberately hidden, scattered across clay tablets, and buried beneath the sands, as if the ancient scribes themselves knew that the world was not yet ready to understand. As we prepare to unfold the tale, it is important to embrace both the wonder and the enigma of Gilgamesh. This is not merely a bedtime story or a historical curiosity. It is a journey into a world where human ambition brushes against the divine, where friendship can challenge fate, and where the fear of death drives the most extraordinary quests. It is a story that has survived the collapse of civilizations, the rise of new religions, and the reinterpretation of history itself. And as we begin, we step carefully into a past that is at once familiar and utterly alien, a past that whispers its secrets through the cracks of time, inviting us to listen closely, to dream, and perhaps to fall asleep to the echoes of the oldest epic the world has ever known. To understand Gilgamesh, one must first understand the world that bore him, the ancient land of Sumer. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Sumer was a land of fertile plains and unpredictable floods, a place where human ingenuity and divine fear intertwined in every aspect of life. Imagine a world where city walls rose from mud bricks baked by the sun, where ziggurats soared skyward as both temples and symbols of ambition, and where every act of civilization, from writing to lawmaking, was both a gift from the gods and a challenge to their authority. This was the birthplace of kings, priests, scribes, and the very notion of what it meant to be human. The cities of Sumer were unlike anything the modern world can easily comprehend. Uruk, the legendary city ruled by Gilgamesh himself, was a sprawling metropolis with towering walls and a population that may have reached tens of thousands. Its streets were alive with the hum of commerce, merchants haggling over grain and textiles, craftsmen shaping clay and metal into tools and idols, and priests performing rituals to appease gods whose favor could mean the difference between abundance and famine. Every corner of the city, every temple and canal, was a testament to human determination and a reminder of human vulnerability. In Sumer, survival depended not only on skill and strength, but on the favor of divine forces that were capricious, powerful, and omnipresent. The landscape of Sumer itself shaped the imagination of its people. The Tigris and Euphrates flooded unpredictably, leaving behind rich silt for crops, but also destroying homes and lives. The sun-baked plains stretched endlessly, and the distant deserts whispered with hidden dangers. In this environment, humans became storytellers, recording their triumphs and their tragedies in cuneiform on clay tablets that would endure for millennia. These writings preserve the earliest ideas of kingship, law, and civilization itself, creating a legacy that would ripple through history in ways that few could have imagined. Religion and mythology were inseparable from daily life. The Sumerians believed that their cities, their crops, and even the stars above were under the dominion of gods whose wills were inscrutable. Each city had its patron deity, and rituals were performed to ensure divine protection. Offerings, sacrifices, and prayers were not merely acts of faith, they were acts of survival. In this world, kings were intermediaries between humanity and the divine. Gilgamesh himself, part god and part human, embodied this delicate balance, walking a line between mortal ambition and divine expectation. His story was both a mirror of Sumerian life and a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris, about the limits of power in a world governed by forces far greater than any individual. Yet Sumer was more than a collection of cities and temples. It was the birthplace of writing, a tool that would forever alter the course of human history. The cuneiform script, etched painstakingly into clay tablets, allowed the Sumerians to preserve knowledge, laws, and stories with precision and permanence. Without this innovation, Gilgamesh might have been lost entirely to the sands of time. Through writing, Sumerians could communicate with the future, leaving a record that would eventually reach scholars thousands of years later, allowing us to reconstruct the myths, dreams, and fears of a civilization that existed long before our own. Trade and culture flourished alongside religion and governance. Sumerians traveled great distances along the rivers and through overland routes, exchanging grain, metals, textiles, and ideas. Their culture was one of both ingenuity and subtle cunning, as city-states competed for resources, prestige, and survival. These interactions shaped the stories they told, embedding lessons about friendship, loyalty, and ambition into their myths. Gilgamesh, though legendary, reflects the values of a society deeply aware of both human limitation and human potential, where greatness was measured not only in conquest, but in wisdom, courage, and the ability to navigate a world that demanded constant vigilance. The climate and geography of Sumer also influenced the imagination of its storytellers. Endless plains, unpredictable floods, and distant deserts became more than mere landscapes. They were symbolic stages for human endeavor and divine intervention. The cedar forests, the riverbanks, and the mountains mentioned in the epic were both real and mythic, blending the tangible with the imagined. In this way, Sumerian storytelling bridged the human and the divine, weaving the mundane and the extraordinary into a tapestry that could convey both practical knowledge and profound existential truth. Sumer was a civilization on the edge of eternity, aware of its own fragility, yet striving to leave a mark that would endure beyond mortality. Every canal dug, every tablet inscribed, and every ziggurat erected was a testament to human ambition and a silent acknowledgement of mortality. In such a world, the story of Gilgamesh was more than entertainment. It was a living reflection of Sumerian life, its fears, its triumphs, and its longing to grasp something eternal in a world governed by chance and the gods. To step into the world of Sumer is to step into a civilization that is at once alien and familiar. It is a world where human beings, much like ourselves, wrestled with the same questions. What is the meaning of life? How can we endure? How can we leave a mark that survives death? The Epic of Gilgamesh was written within this world, a story born of rivers and mud, kings and gods, ambition and mortality. And as we prepare to follow the epic, we must carry this vision in our minds, a world of both brilliance and fragility, of humanity striving toward the eternal, even as the sands of time threaten to erase every trace of its existence. In the heart of Sumer, in the sprawling city of Uruk, a king ruled who was unlike any other. His name was Gilgamesh, a figure both revered and feared, a man whose very existence blurred the line between mortal and divine. According to the stories etched on clay tablets, he was 2/3 god and 1/3 human, a lineage that granted him strength beyond any ordinary man, yet bound him inexorably to the limitations and sorrows of mortality. His reign was marked by extraordinary achievements and acts of ambition that would resonate through the ages. Yet he was also a ruler whose arrogance and recklessness set the stage for both tragedy and revelation. To imagine Gilgamesh is to picture a king larger than life. He was said to tower over his subjects, possessing a strength that could fell trees, defeat enemies, and command obedience with a glance. His wisdom was unmatched, and yet his early rule was tyrannical, a reflection of youthful hubris and the intoxicating power of divine favor. Citizens whispered both awe and fear, for while Gilgamesh protected the city and expanded its influence, he also demanded extraordinary service, often placing his desires above the welfare of his people. In this tension between greatness and excess, the essence of Gilgamesh emerges, a man who embodies both the potential and peril of humanity at its most ambitious. But Gilgamesh was not merely a figure of brute strength. He was a reflection of the ideals and anxieties of his civilization. The Sumerians, acutely aware of the fragility of life and the capriciousness of the gods, projected their hopes and fears onto their king. Through him, they explored the struggle to achieve immortality, the pursuit of glory, and the inevitability of death. His story was designed to instruct as much as it entertained, illustrating the consequences of arrogance, the transformative power of friendship, and the inexorable march of time. In Gilgamesh, one sees both a cautionary tale and a heroic ideal, a man who could aspire to the heavens but could never escape the shadow of mortality. Stories of his exploits are vast and varied. He constructed the magnificent walls of Uruk, a feat that symbolized both protection and human ingenuity. He confronted formidable creatures, battled the monstrous Humbaba in the cedar forest, and defied gods in acts of daring that no mere mortal could attempt. Each adventure was not merely a demonstration of strength, but a narrative device, a reflection of the complex interplay between human ambition and divine oversight. In these tales, the epic explores themes that remain strikingly relevant today: the tension between courage and hubris, the pursuit of knowledge that may be beyond human comprehension, and the consequences of challenging forces far greater than oneself. Yet, for all his power, Gilgamesh was ultimately defined by his human vulnerabilities. His arrogance alienated his people, and his pride drew the attention and wrath of the gods. It is in these moments of confrontation with divine authority that the epic becomes more than a tale of heroism. It becomes a meditation on mortality, ethics, and the limits of human control. The gods themselves are not distant figures of mercy, but active participants, shaping events with inscrutable intentions. Gilgamesh's journey, therefore, is as much about understanding the divine as it is about discovering the limits of his own strength. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Gilgamesh is his capacity for growth. While he begins as a figure of overwhelming power and ambition, his encounters, most notably with Enkidu, the wild man created by the gods, transform him. Friendship, loss, and the relentless pursuit of immortality force him to confront his fears, his limitations, and ultimately his humanity. It is this evolution that allows the story to resonate across millennia. The tale reminds us that no matter how powerful or gifted a person may be, they are bound by the same universal truths: the inevitability of death, the fragility of relationships, and the necessity of wisdom and humility. Historical evidence suggests that Gilgamesh may not have been purely myth. Archaeologists and scholars have found references to a king of Uruk bearing his name, and while the historical details are fragmentary, they hint at a ruler whose deeds may have inspired the epic. The blending of fact and fiction in Gilgamesh's story is deliberate, a hallmark of Sumerian storytelling. By merging historical record with mythic embellishment, the epic elevates the king into a symbol of human aspiration, crafting a narrative that is both entertaining and instructive. This duality is part of what has allowed the Epic of Gilgamesh to endure for thousands of years. In addition to his strength and wisdom, Gilgamesh embodies the tension between human desire and divine order. He seeks to challenge mortality, to achieve eternal fame, and to understand the secrets of life itself. Yet every step he takes is watched by the gods, who remind him, and the audience, that human power has limits. This tension drives the narrative forward, creating suspense and philosophical depth, and it is precisely this interplay between ambition and limitation that makes Gilgamesh not just a king of his time, but a timeless figure whose struggles mirror those of every generation. The legend of Gilgamesh is more than the story of a single man. It is a reflection of a civilization that grappled with the same existential questions we still face today. Through his adventures, his triumphs, and his failures, the Sumerians explored themes of leadership, mortality, friendship, and the pursuit of meaning. And those centuries have passed, the story remains vibrant, whispering across time, inviting each new generation to walk in the footsteps of a king who dared to challenge the gods, who sought wisdom beyond human comprehension, and who ultimately reminds us that greatness is measured not only by deeds, but by understanding, growth, and the courage to face the inevitable truth of our own mortality. In the wild expanses beyond the walls of Uruk, where the rivers meandered through untamed plains and forests stretched beyond the horizon, there lived a creature unlike any the city had ever known. His name was Enkidu, and he was born not of human civilization, but of the raw, unbridled forces of nature itself. Created by the gods as a counterbalance to Gilgamesh's overwhelming power, Enkidu was a man in form, but wild in essence, with strength rivaling that of the king, yet with instincts untouched by the trappings of cities, laws, and hierarchies. He roamed with the animals, drank from rivers, and ran freely across the plains, a symbol of the natural world in its purest, untamed state. Enkidu's existence was a study in contrast. Where Gilgamesh represented civilization, ambition, and human striving, Enkidu embodied instinct, freedom, and the unrefined wisdom of the natural world. His body was powerful, his senses acute, and his connection to the earth profound. He was able to wrestle with lions, run with gazelles, and move silently through the wilderness as if he were part of it. Yet beneath his primal exterior lay the potential for transformation, a capacity for understanding, emotion, and loyalty that the gods had carefully engineered. Enkidu was both a force of nature and a mirror for humanity, reflecting the duality that defines all of us, the tension between instinct and intellect, freedom and responsibility. The Sumerians, through the story of Enkidu, explored the delicate balance between civilization and nature. His wildness posed a threat to Uruk, and his strength rivaled that of the king himself. The city, unaccustomed to such power outside its walls, sent a temple prostitute, Shamhat, to humanize him. Through her guidance, Enkidu learned speech, manners, and the ways of human society. He came to understand the rhythms of city life, the laws of kings and gods, and the pleasures and pains of human companionship. This transformation was more than a simple tale of domestication. It was an allegory of humanity's own journey from primal instinct to structured society, and the costs and gains that accompany that shift. Enkidu's introduction into civilization created a tension that would drive the epic forward. He could have remained in the wilderness, a being of pure instinct and divine creation. Yet his meeting with Shamhat and eventual encounter with Gilgamesh altered the course of both their lives. When he first arrived in Uruk, the city was abuzz with tales of this wild man, a being who could challenge the mightiest of kings. Enkidu's existence was a living proof that human ambition must contend not only with external forces, but with nature itself, a force that is often misunderstood, feared, and ultimately respected. The encounter between Enkidu and Gilgamesh is one of the most compelling moments in the epic. When they first meet, they fight, a clash of raw strength and divine favor. Yet from this confrontation emerges mutual respect and an unbreakable bond. Enkidu, once an outsider, becomes the closest companion of the king, a mirror to Gilgamesh's humanity, tempering his arrogance and teaching him lessons that no advisor could convey. Their friendship is not merely a personal relationship. It is a symbolic union of civilization and nature, of instinct and reason, strength and empathy. Together, they are greater than the sum of their parts, embarking on quests that would define their legacies. Enkidu's role extends beyond companionship. He challenges Gilgamesh, reminding the king of the consequences of unchecked power. He is both protector and conscience, urging caution where ambition threatens folly. His presence introduces themes of mortality, loyalty, and transformation. Through Enkidu, the epic questions what it means to be human. Is it strength, wisdom, courage, or compassion that defines us? And how does one balance the instincts of survival with the responsibilities of society, leadership, and friendship? These are questions that the Sumerians wrestled with, encoded in a narrative that speaks across millennia. There is also a profound tragedy in Enkidu's story. His humanity, acquired through civilization, makes him vulnerable to the same forces that govern all mortals. The gods, angered by his and Gilgamesh's defiance in slaying Humbaba and challenging divine authority, decree his death. Enkidu's fall from life is not just a plot device. It is a reflection on the cost of knowledge, companionship, and ambition. He becomes a cautionary figure, a reminder that even the strongest among us are bound by mortality, and that the pursuit of glory often carries unseen consequences. The emotional weight of Enkidu's death transforms Gilgamesh. The loss of his companion forces the king to confront his own mortality, grief, and vulnerability. Through this lens, Enkidu is not merely a character in the story. He is the catalyst for the philosophical and existential journey that defines the epic. His life, transformation, and death illuminate the fragile, fleeting nature of human existence and the importance of friendship, love, and empathy as antidotes to the inevitability of loss. Enkidu also represents the eternal tension between the untamed and the civilized, a theme that resonates far beyond ancient Sumer. He is nature made human, a bridge between instinct and intellect, wilderness and order. His story asks us to consider what is lost when we conform, what is gained when we connect with others, and how the lessons of the natural world can guide our most human endeavors. In every sense, Enkidu is both a mirror and a teacher. Through his life, we learn about the power of transformation, the depth of loyalty, and the inevitability of mortality. His friendship with Gilgamesh illuminates the human condition, revealing the balance between strength and vulnerability, ambition and humility. And as the epic unfolds, it is Enkidu's presence and his absence that shapes the journey, making the story not just about kings and monsters, but about what it truly means to live, to care, and to face the inevitability of death with courage and understanding. The story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu is, at its heart, a story of friendship. It is a friendship forged through conflict, rivalry, and the collision of two extraordinary forces. When Gilgamesh, the mighty king of Uruk, first encounters Enkidu, the wild man of the plains, their initial meeting is not a greeting but a battle. Strength meets strength, pride meets pride, and for a moment, it seems that neither will yield. This confrontation is more than a physical struggle. It is the meeting of two worlds, civilization and nature, ambition and instinct, divine favor and earthly cunning. In their clash, the story hints at a deeper truth. The bonds that endure are often forged in challenge, struggle, and mutual respect. As the dust settles from their confrontation, a transformation begins. The rivalry between them gives way to understanding, then to respect, and finally to an unbreakable bond of friendship. Enkidu, once untamed and wild, becomes the mirror for Gilgamesh's humanity, reflecting both his strengths and his flaws. Gilgamesh, in turn, learns humility, empathy, and the value of companionship from a being who had once lived outside the bounds of human society. Together, they become a force unlike any other, balancing each other in ways that no single hero could achieve alone. Their friendship is more than personal. It is emblematic, a story of how human connection can temper ambition, teach wisdom, and offer guidance through life's inevitable trials. Their joint adventures are legendary. Among the first is their journey to the cedar forest, where the monstrous guardian Humbaba resides. The forest itself is described as both beautiful and terrifying, a place that tests courage, loyalty, and the limits of human strength. Facing Humbaba is not merely a physical challenge, but a symbolic one. The conquering of fear, the assertion of human will, and the audacity to confront forces that are both natural and divine. In this adventure, Gilgamesh and Enkidu learn to trust each other implicitly. Their friendship allows them to act with coordination and courage, demonstrating that true companionship transforms individual strength into a collective power greater than the sum of its parts. The tale also explores the subtle dynamics of rivalry and challenge within friendship. Even as they support each other, Gilgamesh and Enkidu push each other to grow, to confront their limitations, and to face the consequences of their actions. Their bond is not one of blind loyalty. It is tested by fear, ambition, and the shadow of mortality. Each triumph and each mistake teaches them about responsibility, leadership, and the fragile balance between strength and wisdom. The epic, in this way, offers a meditation on the nature of human relationships, suggesting that the deepest connections are forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of shared struggle. The intervention of the gods further complicates their story. The Sumerian deities, observing the actions of the two friends, act in ways that both aid and challenge them. While Gilgamesh and Enkidu can achieve feats beyond ordinary men, they are never fully free from divine oversight. Their friendship, while powerful, exists in a world where every choice has cosmic consequences. The slaying of Humbaba, for instance, brings both fame and divine displeasure, foreshadowing tragedy and reinforcing the moral complexity of their adventures. Through these divine interventions, the epic emphasizes that friendship and loyalty are tested not only by circumstance, but by the interplay of mortal ambition and the inscrutable will of higher powers. It is not only their adventures that define the depth of their bond. It is the emotional resonance of their connection. When Enkidu falls ill and dies, the weight of loss transforms Gilgamesh. The king, once fearless and invincible, is confronted with grief so profound that it drives him into a relentless quest to understand mortality, eternal life, and the very limits of human existence. Here, the friendship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu becomes the emotional and philosophical engine of the epic. It is a reminder that human relationships are central to our understanding of life, and that the love, loyalty, and companionship we share are the forces that shape our choices, our courage, and ultimately our legacy. Their friendship is also a story of balance between impulse and reflection, action and restraint. Enkidu tempers Gilgamesh's recklessness, while Gilgamesh inspires courage and boldness in Enkidu. Together, they navigate moral ambiguity, confront existential fears, and challenge both divine and earthly obstacles. Their interactions illustrate a fundamental principle of human experience, that true friendship is not about sameness or submission, but about complementarity, growth, and mutual empowerment. Each learns from the other, and each evolves because of the bond they share. In examining their relationship, the epic also offers timeless lessons on mortality, ambition, and the pursuit of meaning. The joy, camaraderie, and shared victories are inseparable from the pain, loss, and eventual confrontation with death. Enkidu's death, the culmination of their shared story, is both a personal tragedy and a narrative turning point. It forces Gilgamesh to confront the inescapable truth that no strength, no courage, and no friendship can entirely shield one from the inevitability of mortality. Yet it also reveals the enduring power of human connection. The lessons of loyalty, love, and courage survive beyond life itself, echoing in the hearts of those who remember. Ultimately, the tale of Gilgamesh and Enkidu transcends the bounds of a simple narrative. It is a meditation on the transformative power of friendship, the delicate balance of rivalry and respect, and the enduring question of how humans face mortality together. Their story invites reflection on the relationships that shape our lives, the challenges that test our bonds, and the ways in which love and loyalty can guide us through even the most formidable trials. In this way, the friendship and rivalry of Gilgamesh and Enkidu become more than legend. They become a mirror for our own lives, a reminder that companionship, courage, and mutual respect are among the most enduring forces in a world marked by uncertainty and impermanence. With friendship forged in fire and strength tested in battle, Gilgamesh and Enkidu step beyond the safety of Uruk, venturing into a world where the mortal and divine intersect in ways both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Their first great challenge lies in the cedar forest, a realm of towering trees and unseen dangers, guarded by Humbaba, a monstrous figure appointed by the gods themselves. This is not merely a physical journey, but a confrontation with forces that define the boundaries of human ambition and divine will. Every step they take into the forest carries the weight of mortality, hubris, and the desire to leave a legacy that defies time. The cedar forest itself is a character in the story, vast and impenetrable, filled with shadows that seem alive and whispers that suggest unseen eyes watching every move. It represents both the natural world and the divine order, a place where human daring is tested against cosmic forces. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, though mighty and courageous, are reminded that even kings and heroes are not exempt from the rules that govern the universe. The forest challenges their senses, their strategy, and their resolve, forcing them to confront the limits of their power. It is in this liminal space between the familiar city and the unknowable wilderness that the epic begins to explore the profound tension between ambition and fate. Humbaba, the guardian of the forest, embodies the formidable power of the divine world. With a face said to radiate fear itself and a presence that dominates the landscape, Humbaba is not merely a monster to be slain, but a symbol of the consequences of overreaching ambition. The gods themselves placed him there to guard the sacred trees, and by daring to confront him, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are challenging not only a physical opponent, but the authority of the divine. Their decision to enter the forest and face Humbaba is an audacious act of defiance, one that demonstrates both their courage and their hubris. It is a test of strength, intellect, and moral judgment, with stakes that extend far beyond the personal. As they approach Humbaba, the tension between human initiative and divine control becomes palpable. Enkidu, grounded in instinct and attuned to natural forces, offers guidance and caution, while Gilgamesh, driven by ambition and the desire for eternal fame, presses forward with relentless determination. Their dynamic illustrates the delicate balance between wisdom and daring, intuition and audacity. The battle itself is intense, a clash of primal power and heroic strategy, a scene where every movement, every decision, carries both literal and symbolic weight. It is a confrontation that tests not only physical prowess, but the very essence of human courage. The slaying of Humbaba, while a victory, is also a moral and existential turning point. It brings fame, yes, but also divine scrutiny. The gods, angered by the audacity of mortals challenging their appointed guardian, intervene in ways that foreshadow tragedy and reflection. Here, the epic delves into themes that resonate far beyond its ancient context. The consequences of defying higher powers, the ethical dimensions of ambition, and the intricate interplay between human will and divine decree. Through this episode, the story begins to illuminate a central Sumerian concern: that human greatness is inseparable from humility, and that acts of courage are inseparable from moral responsibility. The journey through the forest also reveals the growing depth of the bond between Gilgamesh and Enkidu. In facing overwhelming danger together, they learn to trust not only in their combined strength, but in each other's judgment, intuition, and courage. Their friendship is transformed into an unshakable alliance, one that will shape the narrative of the epic and the emotional development of both characters. The forest, the monster, and the divine challenge become catalysts for this transformation, demonstrating that true heroism is inseparable from loyalty, mutual respect, and the capacity to navigate moral complexity. Beyond the immediate adventure, this episode carries broader, symbolic significance. The cedar forest is more than a geographical location. It is a threshold between the known and the unknown, between the city and the wilderness, the mortal and the divine. It represents the human impulse to explore, to challenge boundaries, and to seek recognition beyond the confines of ordinary life. By entering the forest, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are engaging in a timeless human endeavor, the pursuit of greatness, the confrontation with forces beyond comprehension, and the quest to understand their place in a universe governed by both visible and invisible powers. The narrative also emphasizes the psychological dimensions of confrontation. Both Gilgamesh and Enkidu experience fear, anticipation, and doubt, yet they transform these emotions into focus, courage, and strategic action. Their inner journeys are mirrored by the external challenges they face, a storytelling technique that heightens tension while exploring the emotional and moral stakes of heroism. This duality, the internal and external struggle, is a hallmark of the epic, illustrating why it has endured as a story not just of adventure, but of human consciousness grappling with mortality, ambition, and divine authority. Finally, the episode sets the stage for the larger themes that will define the epic. By confronting Humbaba and challenging the will of the gods, Gilgamesh and Enkidu step onto a path that will lead them to questions of life, death, and immortality. The forest, the monster, and the divine oversight are early indicators of the epic's deeper philosophical explorations. They signal that the journey is not merely physical but existential, that the adventure is not only about glory but about understanding the boundaries of human power and the responsibilities that accompany it. As Gilgamesh and Enkidu emerge from the forest, victorious yet aware of the consequences, the story reminds us that the path of ambition is never without peril. Every act of courage is shadowed by risk. Every triumph carries moral and cosmic weight. The journey has begun in earnest, and while the victories are dazzling, the epic whispers that the greatest challenges and the deepest lessons are yet to come. In this way, the confrontation with the gods is both an opening act of adventure and the first step in a profound exploration of friendship, mortality, and the human struggle to transcend the ordinary and touch the eternal. As Gilgamesh's fame spreads across the lands of Sumer, tales of his strength, courage, and daring adventures reach even the heights of the divine realm. Among those who take notice is Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and desire, a figure both alluring and formidable, capable of granting blessings and unleashing devastation. Her gaze falls upon Gilgamesh, and with it comes temptation, ambition, and danger intertwined. The encounter between a mortal king and a goddess is not merely a story of romance or desire. It is a narrative charged with political, spiritual, and existential tension, revealing both the perils of hubris and the fragile boundaries between human and divine. Ishtar, in all her power, offers Gilgamesh a union that would elevate him in ways unimaginable. To accept her would mean favor with one of the most influential deities, an intimate connection that could bring him glory, wealth, and perhaps even a taste of immortality. Yet the proposition is fraught with peril. In Sumerian thought, the gods were capricious, and their favor could turn to wrath with a single misstep. The epic presents this encounter not only as a test of courage, but as a moral and psychological challenge. How should a mortal navigate desire, power, and ambition when faced with a being whose intentions are unknowable and whose influence can alter destiny? Gilgamesh's response is one of defiance. He refuses Ishtar's advances, citing the misfortunes that befell her previous lovers, mortals destroyed by her whims, their lives consumed by passion and cruelty. His rejection is bold, audacious, and dangerous, for in denying a goddess, he invites her wrath and disrupts the delicate balance between the human and divine. In this moment, The story explores themes of autonomy, moral choice, and the courage to resist temptation, even when the stakes are extraordinarily high. Gilgamesh is not merely rejecting love. He is asserting human agency in a universe where gods often dictate the course of life. The consequences of this defiance are swift and severe. Ishtar, enraged by humiliation and insult, unleashes the bull of heaven upon Uruk, a creature of immense power, destruction, and divine wrath. The city quakes, and chaos threatens to engulf everything Gilgamesh has built. Here, the epic illustrates the delicate interplay between action and consequence, desire and consequence, ambition and responsibility. The rejection of Ishtar is not a simple moral lesson. It is a dramatic event that tests Gilgamesh's leadership, courage, and capacity for strategic thought. It forces him and Enkidu to confront the deadly consequences of challenging divine authority, even when guided by moral conviction. The battle with the Bull of Heaven is one of the epic's most dramatic episodes. Gilgamesh and Enkidu face a force beyond ordinary human comprehension, a being imbued with divine strength and destructive power. Their combined skill, courage, and mutual trust are the only means of survival. In overcoming the bull, they assert human resilience and ingenuity, demonstrating that even in the shadow of divine wrath, mortality can achieve extraordinary feats. Yet this victory comes at a cost, for the gods do not overlook the defiance of mortals lightly. The episode foreshadows tragedy, as the consequences of challenging divine authority ripple through the narrative, shaping the destinies of both heroes. Beyond the immediate conflict, the story carries profound symbolic meaning. Ishtar represents not only desire and passion, but also the unpredictable forces that test human ambition. She embodies the allure and danger of love, the intoxicating power of attraction, and the fine line between devotion and destruction. Her role in the epic highlights the tension between mortal desire and cosmic order, revealing that choices guided solely by ambition, impulse, or pride can have consequences that extend far beyond personal intent. Through Ishtar, the story explores the intricate dynamics of power, sexuality, and responsibility, offering insights into human nature that remain relevant across millennia. The interaction between Gilgamesh and Ishtar also explores the gender and social dynamics of Sumerian culture. In rejecting the goddess, Gilgamesh is asserting the primacy of moral judgment over blind submission to power. At the same time, the episode reflects the societal anxieties surrounding female authority, divine influence, and the consequences of unbridled desire. It is a narrative layered with political, spiritual, and psychological significance, suggesting that the epic was not merely entertainment, but a complex meditation on human behavior, divine interaction, and the moral responsibilities of those in positions of power. Moreover, this episode deepens our understanding of Gilgamesh's character. He is not a flawless hero, but a man capable of wisdom, foresight, and moral discernment. His refusal of Ishtar demonstrates an evolving consciousness, a recognition that true greatness is not measured solely by strength or conquest, but by the ability to navigate the perils of desire, temptation, and divine influence. It is a lesson in self-awareness, courage, and a sometimes painful exercise of agency in a world governed by forces both visible and unseen. Finally, the tale of Ishtar and Gilgamesh sets the stage for the tragic and transformative events that follow. By defying a goddess, Gilgamesh and Enkidu set in motion a series of consequences that will test their friendship, courage, and understanding of mortality. The story becomes not just a narrative of adventure or romance, but a meditation on the limits of human power, the costs of ambition, and the delicate balance between choice and consequence. In this way, Ishtar's role is both catalytic and symbolic, representing the challenges, temptations, and moral complexities that shape the journey of the epic's heroes and illuminate the broader human condition. Through this episode, the epic reminds us that desire and ambition, while powerful, are intertwined with danger, responsibility, and moral consequence. It teaches that wisdom often requires resistance, courage often requires foresight, and even the mightiest hero must contend with forces far beyond human comprehension. The story of Ishtar and forbidden love is not only a tale of divine encounter and mortal defiance. It is a timeless exploration of temptation, power, and the ethical challenges that define what it means to be human. The shadow of mortality, long foreshadowed in the adventures of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, finally descends with a force that shakes the heart of Uruk and alters the course of the epic. Enkidu, once a being of untamed wilderness and divine creation, now fully human in mind and spirit, falls gravely ill. His death is not sudden but drawn out, a slow unraveling that reveals the fragility of even the strongest among us. For Gilgamesh, the loss is devastating. It is a moment of profound grief and awakening, forcing him to confront truths that no battle, no victory, and no divine favor could shield him from: the inevitability of death and the limits of human power. Enkidu's illness and passing are depicted with harrowing detail on the cuneiform tablets, underscoring the Sumerians' understanding of mortality and the human response to loss. The once mighty companion, who had wrestled lions, defied gods, and tempered the arrogance of kings, is now reduced to vulnerability. His suffering is physical, yes, but also symbolic. It reflects the universal truth that all life, no matter how powerful or exalted, is subject to decay. The epic does not shy away from this reality. Instead, it lingers on it, drawing the audience into a meditation on life, death, and the emotional depth of human experience. Gilgamesh's response to Enkidu's death is both emotional and philosophical. Rage, sorrow, and despair grip him, and he wanders the streets and wilderness of Uruk in search of answers. How could the gods allow this to happen? How could a being so vital, so strong, and so full of life be taken away? His grief becomes the catalyst for the next phase of the epic, a relentless quest for understanding, immortality, and the elusive meaning of existence. Enkidu's death is transformative, propelling Gilgamesh from a king concerned with fame and power to a seeker of wisdom and a man haunted by the finite nature of life. The narrative emphasizes that Enkidu's fall is not merely a personal tragedy. It is a profound revelation about the human condition. His mortality forces Gilgamesh, and through him, the audience, to grapple with universal questions. Why do we fear death? What is the value of life when it is destined to end? How can friendship, love, and loyalty provide meaning in the face of inevitable loss? These questions are central to the epic's enduring power, connecting a story written thousands of years ago to the eternal concerns of every human generation. The god's role in Enkidu's death is complex and deliberate. Some tablets suggest that Enkidu is punished for the slaying of Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven, acts of defiance that angered the divine. Others imply that his death is a cosmic necessity, a reminder of the balance between human ambition and the natural order. In either interpretation, the epic underscores a profound theme: that life is a delicate equilibrium, and that even the boldest and bravest are bound by forces beyond their control. Enkidu's death is both a narrative device and a philosophical lesson, illustrating that the pursuit of glory and knowledge comes with consequences that cannot be ignored. The emotional impact of this loss is heightened by the intimate bond between the two companions. Enkidu was not only Gilgamesh's ally, but his mirror, a being who tempered his arrogance, shared his adventures, and exemplified loyalty and courage. The absence of Enkidu leaves a void that cannot be filled, and it is this emptiness that drives Gilgamesh's quest for immortality. The epic suggests that human relationships are the crucible in which understanding and wisdom are forged, and that loss, while painful, is also a teacher. Through grief, Gilgamesh comes to comprehend the fragility, beauty, and transient nature of life itself. Death, in this narrative, becomes revelation. Enkidu's fall illuminates the limits of physical power, divine favor, and heroic ambition. It demonstrates that no mortal can escape the universal truth of mortality, and that the search for meaning must extend beyond conquest and glory. Gilgamesh's journey following this event is not merely a quest to defy death, but an exploration of the essence of life, the nature of human ambition, and the ethical responsibilities that accompany friendship, power, and leadership. In losing Enkidu, he is confronted with the ultimate teacher, the inevitability of human finitude. The Sumerians understood that mortality is inseparable from the human experience. By presenting Enkidu's death in such vivid, emotionally charged detail, the epic encourages reflection on the interconnectedness of life and death, joy and sorrow, courage and vulnerability. It underscores the notion that our understanding of existence is shaped as much by loss as by triumph, and that wisdom often arises from the painful acknowledgement of limits. Enkidu's fall transforms the epic from a tale of adventure to a meditation on life's most profound questions, establishing a moral and philosophical foundation that resonates across centuries. Finally, Enkidu's death sets in motion the central quest of the second half of the epic, Gilgamesh's search for immortality. The narrative transitions from physical adventure to existential exploration, from battles with monsters to the confrontation with mortality itself. The loss of Enkidu becomes the emotional and philosophical fulcrum of the epic, compelling Gilgamesh and the audience to consider what it means to live fully in a world where all things, no matter how mighty, are subject to the inevitability of death. In this way, the fall of Enkidu is not merely an ending. It is a revelation, a turning point that deepens the story, enriches its themes, and propels the epic into its most profound and contemplative chapters. The death of Enkidu leaves Gilgamesh transformed, haunted by grief, and obsessed with a question that has haunted humanity since time immemorial. How can one escape the inevitability of death? No longer satisfied with fame, glory, or earthly accomplishments, he embarks on a journey that transcends the physical world, a quest for immortality that will take him to the edges of the known world, into realms of mystery and danger where mortals rarely tread. This journey is not only literal but existential, a descent into fear, hope, and the profound unknown, driven by the primal desire to outwit the ultimate fate that claimed his beloved companion. Guided by desperation, Gilgamesh seeks out Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the Great Flood, whose existence offers a tantalizing promise, proof that mortality can be overcome. Crossing deserts, rivers, and mountains, the king confronts landscapes that are both harsh and symbolic, each step reflecting his inner turmoil. These regions, desolate and awe-inspiring, mirror the emotional and philosophical terrain of his mind. In Sumerian thought, the unknown was often represented by wilderness and extreme natural phenomena, places where divine forces might reveal themselves or punish the unwise. By venturing into these realms, Gilgamesh is entering both a physical and metaphysical landscape, one where courage, ingenuity, and humility are tested in equal measure. The journey itself is fraught with obstacles that symbolize the limits of human endurance. Dangerous rivers, treacherous mountains, and the monsters that lurk at the periphery of civilization serve as tests of strength and resolve. In facing these challenges, Gilgamesh is forced to confront not only physical danger, but the psychological burden of mortality. His determination is relentless, yet every step reminds him of the fragile nature of life and the fleeting quality of human achievements. The epic emphasizes that the path to understanding and transcendence is never easy. It demands sacrifice, courage, and the humility to recognize one's own limitations. When Gilgamesh finally reaches Utnapishtim, he is met with a figure both wise and enigmatic, whose existence blurs the line between human and divine. Utnapishtim recounts the story of the Great Flood, a cataclysm that reshaped the world and granted him immortality as a reward for survival and obedience to the gods. This tale is laden with symbolism. It speaks to the fragility of civilization, the omnipotence of divine forces, and the possibility that life itself is both precious and transient. For Gilgamesh, the story is both a revelation and a challenge, demonstrating that immortality is not granted lightly, and that human ambition must contend with forces beyond comprehension. Utnapishtim's tests further emphasize the impossibility of escaping death through simple courage or strength. He challenges Gilgamesh to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, a seemingly impossible task meant to teach patience, discipline, and the limits of human endurance. The king fails, succumbing to sleep, and in this failure, the epic communicates a profound truth. Mortality cannot be overcome by force or desire alone. The lesson is clear, yet delivered with the subtlety and depth of myth. Human life is bound by time, and the pursuit of immortality requires understanding, acceptance, and wisdom beyond mere heroism. Yet Utnapishtim offers one final chance, a plant that restores youth hidden in the depths of the ocean. Gilgamesh retrieves it through immense effort, diving into waters dark and unknown, confronting both physical danger and existential uncertainty. The plant symbolizes hope, renewal, and the fleeting possibility of transcending natural limits. Yet it also reminds us that life's treasures are often temporary, fragile, and subject to forces beyond human control. In carrying it back to Uruk, Gilgamesh embodies both triumph and the precarious nature of existence, reflecting the delicate balance between ambition and the inevitability of loss. The journey to immortality is as much about self-discovery as it is about defying death. Gilgamesh learns that true wisdom is not merely the accumulation of power or the conquest of mortality, but the recognition of life's transience, the acceptance of human limits, and the understanding that legacy is preserved not through eternal life, but through deeds, knowledge, and memory. Each obstacle, each encounter with divine beings, and each test of endurance contributes to a growing awareness that life's value lies in the experience itself, the love, friendship, courage, and wisdom that define human existence. This section of the epic also explores themes of cosmic order and divine justice. Utnapishtim's immortality is not a simple reward for courage. It is granted as part of a divine plan, illustrating that human life operates within frameworks of morality, destiny, and cosmic balance. Gilgamesh's failure to attain true immortality underscores a recurring Sumerian lesson, that humans must navigate existence with humility, respect for divine order, and acceptance of mortality. The narrative teaches that the pursuit of eternal life, while noble, is bound by rules beyond mortal comprehension, and that wisdom comes not from escaping death, but from understanding it. Finally, the quest leaves Gilgamesh profoundly changed. Though he does not achieve literal immortality, the journey transforms his understanding of life, death, and leadership. He returns to Uruk with insight, tempered ambition, and a renewed appreciation for the fleeting beauty of human existence. The epic conveys that true transcendence is not the evasion of death, but the cultivation of wisdom, courage, and legacy, the things that endure long after the body has perished. In this way, the quest for immortality becomes an allegory for every human struggle to find meaning. leaving audiences with both awe at the hero's journey and reflection on the impermanence that defines all life. Gilgamesh's heart was heavy as he left the ruins of his friend's death behind him, each step echoing with the memory of Enkidu's laughter, his untamed strength, and the tragic frailty of human life. The grief that had settled in his chest had transformed into a burning determination, a relentless desire that eclipsed fear, doubt, or hesitation. He was no longer the king who strode arrogantly through the streets of Uruk. He was a man confronting the profound truth that had haunted humanity for as long as stories had been told: mortality. Every blade of grass, every shifting dune, every whispering wind seemed to remind him of the inexorable passage of time, and with each reminder, his urgency grew. The path he now walked led beyond the boundaries of his known world, through deserts that shimmered with the heat of the sun and mountains that pierced the clouds like ancient sentinels. The lands were vast, lonely, and silent except for the cries of distant animals and the occasional rustle of a hidden brook. Travelers and merchants spoke in hushed tones of strange beings and unreachable cities at the edges of maps, where gods themselves were said to dwell. Gilgamesh pressed on, undeterred by the uncertainty of what lay ahead, because he sought not conquest, not wealth, but something infinitely more elusive: the secret of everlasting life. His journey was as much internal as it was external. Each night, he reflected on the fragility of the human body, the fleeting beauty of youth, and the impermanence of even the greatest accomplishments. His kingdom, his walls, his gardens, all seemed suddenly insignificant against the horizon of eternity. This realization weighed heavily on him, yet it fueled a relentless drive, for if death was unavoidable for ordinary men, perhaps the gods had preserved a fragment of immortality somewhere, hidden in a distant, forbidden place, waiting for the bold or desperate to find it. Legends spoke of Utnapishtim, the immortal man who had survived the Great Flood, a being who had been granted eternal life by the gods themselves. Gilgamesh had heard whispers of this figure in the marketplaces of Uruk, in the tales of wandering priests, and in the songs sung by storytellers whose eyes seemed to gleam with knowing secrets. The path to Utnapishtim was fraught with dangers, the stories warned: deserts where travelers vanished, mountains that swallowed the unwary, and creatures who guarded thresholds with hunger and wrath. And yet, these tales did not deter him. Each story, each warning, was a signpost pointing toward the truth he sought. He journeyed through barren wastelands where the sun scorched his skin and the winds carried the cries of long-forgotten travelers. The nights were cold and endless, and Gilgamesh often felt the weight of his solitude pressing upon him. But he also felt a strange companionship in the natural world. The whispering of the wind through ancient trees, the shimmer of stars reflected in desert sands, the songs of distant rivers winding unseen through the mountains. Nature seemed to guide him, sometimes subtly, sometimes with overwhelming clarity, as if the earth itself recognized the enormity of his quest. Encounters along the way tested him in ways he had never imagined. He faced illusions and visions, dreams that seemed to speak directly to his fears and desires. Sometimes he would wake in the night to find the land transformed, as if the gods were testing his resolve. He wrestled with temptation, confronted visions of his own mortality, and questioned whether he was worthy of such knowledge. The road was unending, a spiral of both discovery and doubt. And yet he pressed on, driven by the echo of his friend's death and the unshakable desire to transcend the limits of human life. Every step toward Utnapishtim was a step deeper into the unknown, and with each step, Gilgamesh began to understand that the quest was not simply for eternal life, but for the understanding of life itself. Immortality, he realized, was less about the endless preservation of flesh than it was about the meaning behind one's existence. the impact of deeds the stories told, and the echoes left behind in the hearts of others. And so, as he climbed jagged cliffs, forded turbulent rivers, and crossed deserts that seemed to stretch into eternity, he carried both grief and hope, fear and courage, knowing that the journey itself held lessons that no mortal king had ever truly grasped. Legends say that Gilgamesh encountered terrifying beasts and divine messengers along this path, beings that could obliterate a man with a glance or vanquish armies with a single command. Some were literal, some were visions conjured by the mind under the strain of such an impossible quest. In every encounter, there was a lesson: humility, patience, courage, and a delicate balance between determination and obsession. And through it all, the image of Enkidu, lost to the grasp of mortality, haunted him, a reminder that even gods might not intervene, and that the pursuit of eternal life could exact a price beyond imagination. As he neared the edges of the world, the land itself seemed to change. Rivers flowed backward, mountains rose impossibly high, and the sky shimmered with colors unseen in Uruk. It was here, in the borderlands between the mortal and the divine, that Gilgamesh would come face to face with the ultimate truth, that immortality was not a gift freely given, but a treasure guarded by time, hardship, and the inscrutable will of the gods. The story of this search, passed down through millennia, reminds every listener that the quest for life beyond death is as old as humanity itself, a journey of longing, courage, and reflection that continues to echo in the hearts of those who dare to seek beyond what is known. By the time Gilgamesh finally glimpsed Utnapishtim's domain, he was no longer merely a king. He was a man transformed by grief, wisdom, and the relentless pursuit of truth, a figure whose journey through deserts, mountains, and inner landscapes would become a mirror for every human soul confronting its own impermanence. The search for immortality was not simply about defying death, he realized. It was about understanding life, embracing its fleeting beauty, and acknowledging that even in loss, there was something eternal to be found in memory, in story, and in the legacy one leaves behind. Gilgamesh's journey brought him to lands few mortals had ever set foot upon, territories where the mountains scraped the sky and the winds carried the whispers of ancient, unseen beings. He had crossed deserts where heat distorted the horizon into trembling mirages, rivers that refused to be crossed, and forests so dense that the sun could barely touch the ground. Every step seemed heavier than the last, each mile marked by the weight of grief and the echo of Enkidu's absence. Yet his determination never wavered, for he sought the one being who had conquered the impossible. Utnapishtim, the immortal, the sole survivor of the great flood that had reshaped the world. The story of the flood had been whispered for generations, told in hushed voices around the fires of Uruk, carried by traveling merchants and wandering priests. In every retelling, the flood was both punishment and salvation, a cataclysm that had washed the world clean while leaving behind the secret of life preserved. Utnapishtim, it was said, had been chosen by the gods to endure the waters, to survive where all others perished. He had been granted immortality not as a gift to man, but as a testament to the whims and designs of the divine. Gilgamesh felt the weight of this knowledge pressing upon him. The gods themselves had deemed the secret of eternal life sacred, hidden from ordinary mortals. As he neared the edges of Utnapishtim's realm, the landscape itself seemed to shift, reflecting the otherworldly nature of the task ahead. The rivers ran strange courses, sometimes glinting with colors unseen in Uruk, and the mountains appeared impossibly steep, as if designed to test the resolve of any who dared approach. Gilgamesh's journey became a trial not only of endurance, but of spirit, as he confronted visions of the flood itself, a torrent of water that erased entire civilizations, gods lamenting over their creations, and the fragile endurance of life clinging to whatever remnants the deluge left behind. When Gilgamesh finally met Utnapishtim, he found not just a man, but a being who seemed to carry the weight of eternity itself. His eyes held the depth of centuries, and his voice resonated with the calm authority of one who had faced destruction and survived. Utnapishtim recounted the story of the Great Flood with solemn reverence, describing the instructions of the gods, the building of the massive vessel that would save a remnant of life, and the torment of witnessing the world drowned while he remained untouched. Every word struck Gilgamesh with the intensity of revelation. The epic was not merely a story, but a record of divine purpose and human endurance. The flood had been both literal and symbolic, a tale of cosmic cleansing and of the fragility of human existence. Gilgamesh listened intently as Utnapishtim described how the god's anger had reshaped the earth, wiping away the hubris of humanity while sparing only the one who had been chosen to endure. There was an almost conspiratorial undertone in the tale, a sense that much of what humanity thought it knew had been lost, erased beneath the waves of history, leaving behind only fragments and whispers. Each fragment carried profound lessons, if only one could decipher them. Humility, respect for forces greater than oneself, and a delicate balance between human ambition and divine will. As the tale unfolded, Gilgamesh's desire for immortality deepened, but it was now accompanied by a dawning awareness of the cost. Utnapishtim spoke of life beyond death not as a promise, but as an extraordinary exception, a solitary spark preserved amid overwhelming loss. He described the loneliness of immortality, the weight of endless time, and the inescapable truth that life's value was inseparable from its finitude. To live forever was to witness the rise and fall of civilizations, to see friends and loved ones fade, and to carry the memory of a world that had already perished once under divine judgment. The encounter with Utnapishtim was a turning point for Gilgamesh. He understood that immortality was not a simple conquest to be achieved, but a lesson in the limits of human ambition. The flood story, encoded in every syllable and symbol, revealed truths about life, death, and the role of humanity within the grand design. Gilgamesh realized that while he might never conquer mortality, he could seek meaning within the boundaries of his existence, and perhaps, in doing so, achieve a different kind of eternity, one not granted by the gods, but carved through deeds, legacy, and memory. The journey back from Utnapishtim's domain was quieter, more contemplative. Gilgamesh walked through forests and plains that now seemed familiar, though he carried with him the weight of extraordinary knowledge. The story of the flood, of survival, and of the rare gift of eternal life was etched into his mind. Every river, every mountain, every whispering wind reminded him of what he had learned. That immortality was less about the body and more about understanding the fleeting nature of existence, embracing the impermanence of life, and cherishing the moments that made humanity remarkable. In retelling this encounter through the epic, generations would come to see Gilgamesh not simply as a king or adventurer, but as a seeker of truths too profound for ordinary life. The flood became more than a catastrophe. It became a symbol of cosmic order, divine intention, and the eternal struggle of humanity to reconcile its ambitions with the finite nature of existence. For Gilgamesh, the quest for Utnapishtim and the story of the Great Flood marked a pivotal chapter in his transformation, from a man consumed by pride and loss to one who glimpsed the depths of divine wisdom and began to understand the profound lessons hidden within mortality itself. After learning the impossible truths from Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh began the long, winding journey back toward Uruk, yet his heart still yearned for something more. Though he had glimpsed the secret of eternal life, he understood now that immortality was not meant for mortals in the way he had once imagined. But fate, it seemed, was not yet finished with him. Tales of a mystical plant reached his ears, a plant hidden in the depths of waters so treacherous that few could hope to survive their passage, a plant whose touch could restore youth and grant renewed vigor, even if it could not make a man truly immortal. The stories were fragmented, whispered in trembling voices by travelers and fishermen, but for Gilgamesh, they offered a glimmer of hope, a chance to grasp a fragment of the divine secret that had so long eluded him. Guided by both desperation and determination, he set sail across the perilous waters. The journey was grueling, fraught with unseen dangers and strange, uncharted currents. The river that carried him seemed alive, almost sentient, flowing with a rhythm that tested both his skill and his resolve. Days stretched into nights, and nights into endless days, with the sky above him shifting colors in ways that seemed impossible, casting reflections on the water that resembled visions of what might be, or warnings of what would follow. Every movement of the boat, every splash of the oar, felt like a delicate negotiation with forces far beyond his understanding, as if the river itself were a guardian of the secret he sought. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Gilgamesh reached the place where the plant was said to grow. It lay on the bottom of a deep pool, glimmering faintly in the filtered sunlight, delicate yet radiant with an almost otherworldly glow. Its presence seemed to hum with life, as if it were connected to the pulse of the earth itself, a fragment of nature imbued with a power far beyond human comprehension. Gilgamesh's hands trembled as he descended, diving beneath the water to grasp the precious plant. He felt a thrill of triumph, a sensation unlike any he had known, as though victory itself had been crystallized in this single, fragile form. Holding the plant, Gilgamesh felt an intense connection to the cycles of life and death that governed all existence. He realized that the plant was more than a physical object. It was a symbol, a living metaphor for the fragile balance between life and the forces that govern it. Here was the fleeting opportunity to reclaim youth, to turn back the hands of time even briefly, to taste the vitality that had been stolen by mortality itself. The epic weight of the moment pressed upon him. He was the bearer of a secret once thought lost to the gods alone, a man standing on the threshold of power that few could ever comprehend. But fate, as it often did, intervened with a cruel twist. Exhausted from his dive, and with the plant safely in his grasp, Gilgamesh rested on the riverbank. And there, in the quiet solitude of his triumph, the unthinkable happened. While he slept, a serpent, silent, cunning, and unobserved, slithered along the river's edge. With a sudden strike, the serpent seized the plant and disappeared into the depths, leaving Gilgamesh to awaken in disbelief and despair. The symbol of renewal, the culmination of all his striving, had been taken from him in an instant. The frustration and sorrow that gripped him were profound, a painful reminder that life's gifts are often fleeting, and that the pursuit of eternal youth was always just beyond reach. In that moment of loss, Gilgamesh understood the deepest lesson of his journey. The plant, magnificent though it was, had been a test, a mirror reflecting the limitations inherent in mortal existence. True immortality could not be seized or stolen, and even the most extraordinary achievements could vanish in the blink of an eye. The loss of the plant did not signify failure, however. Rather, it crystallized the wisdom he had been accumulating throughout his odyssey, that life's meaning is not measured by its length, but by the depth of experience, the bonds forged, and the legacy left behind. Every struggle, every triumph, every sorrow had shaped him, transforming grief into insight and fear into understanding. As he began the journey back to Uruk, the river flowing silently beneath the stars, Gilgamesh carried with him both the weight of his loss and the subtle triumph of what he had learned. He had glimpsed the extraordinary, touched the edge of the divine, and confronted the cruel indifference of the world. Yet he also grasped the delicate truth that made life precious. That impermanence, fragility, and mortality give significance to every moment, every friendship, every choice. The story of the plant of rejuvenation, passed down through generations, would endure not because it granted eternal life, but because it taught the eternal lesson of the human condition, that even in loss, even in fleeting beauty, there is wisdom to be found, and that the journey itself carries the ultimate reward. The epic in this telling reminds every listener that the pursuit of immortality is never simply about defying death. It is about seeking understanding, confronting limits, and embracing the fleeting nature of existence with courage and grace. Gilgamesh had reached the heights of human ambition, touched the edges of divine mystery, and returned with a knowledge far greater than mere longevity. The awareness that life, in all its impermanence, is infinitely rich and infinitely precious. And in that awareness, he found a form of immortality far greater than any plant or potion could ever offer, the enduring legacy of a life truly lived. Gilgamesh's journey back to Uruk was quieter than his departure, yet no less profound. The city that had once seemed familiar now appeared through the lens of someone transformed by grief, triumph, and revelation. Each wall, each tower, each bustling street seemed imbued with a deeper significance, as though the very stones themselves remembered the countless generations who had built and defended them. The grandeur of Uruk no longer impressed him in the same way. It was no longer merely a monument to human achievement, but a reminder of the transient nature of all things. His heart was heavy with the knowledge that the immortality he had sought so desperately was not to be grasped through magic or divine favor. And yet, within him burned a new kind of understanding, one forged in the crucible of loss, experience, and relentless pursuit. As he walked through the city gates, Gilgamesh reflected on the journey that had carried him through deserts, mountains, and distant, almost mythical lands. He thought of Enkidu, whose death had set him on this path, and whose memory now haunted every step he took. The bond they had shared was a reminder that life's true immortality lies not in the body, but in the echoes left in others, in memory, in stories, and in the quiet influence of actions that ripple far beyond a single lifetime. Uruk, vibrant and alive, was itself a testament to this lesson, a city of bricks and walls that bore witness to generations of human striving, rising and falling in cycles, yet leaving traces that endured across the centuries. The people of Uruk, unaware of the transformation their king had undergone, greeted him as they had always done, with respect, curiosity, and the quiet rhythm of daily life. To them, Gilgamesh remained a king, a figure of authority and power. Yet internally, he was no longer merely a ruler. He was a seeker, a man who had glimpsed the edge of divine knowledge and returned with the wisdom of mortality. He walked through the gardens, through the markets, and along the riverbanks, observing life in its simple, ordinary beauty. Children played without thought of death. Merchants argued over prices with fleeting passion, and the sun cast its light upon the river in patterns that would vanish within moments. Gilgamesh understood, with a clarity born from his journey, that these fleeting moments were the true treasures of existence, ephemeral, fragile, yet infinitely meaningful. He reflected on the lessons of his odyssey, the wisdom of Utnapishtim, the fleeting gift of the rejuvenating plant, and the enduring influence of his departed friend. Every encounter, every danger, every revelation had shaped him, revealing truths about power, ambition, mortality, and the essence of life itself. He realized that a king's legacy is not measured solely by the walls he erects or the battles he wins, but by the stories he leaves behind, the people he touches, and the memory of his deeds that persists long after flesh and stone have returned to dust. In this realization, he found a quiet consolation, a profound acceptance of the limits imposed upon all living things. Walking along the city walls, Gilgamesh contemplated the enormity of his accomplishments and the depth of his losses. He had faced gods, monsters, and the relentless passage of time, yet he returned with a knowledge that no trial could take from him. That life's value is measured not by its duration, but by the courage, compassion, and understanding with which it is lived. Uruk itself, with its towering ziggurats and bustling streets, became a mirror of this insight, a city that would endure not because of immortal rulers, but because of the collective memory of countless lives, each contributing to the ever-turning wheel of history. The people of Uruk, oblivious to the extraordinary journey their king had undertaken, would continue their lives, unaware that the very essence of humanity's greatest quest had unfolded just beyond their perception. Yet in Gilgamesh's quiet reflection, the eternal truth became clear. Immortality is not a gift to be seized, but a legacy to be crafted. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every memory preserved in the hearts of others contributes to a form of enduring life far beyond the confines of mortality. In this state of reflection, Gilgamesh found peace. He no longer sought to escape death, no longer obsessed over the elusive promise of eternal youth or divine favor. Instead, he embraced the impermanence of life, recognizing that the fleeting nature of existence was what made it so precious, so vivid, and so full of meaning. The city of Uruk, with its walls, its people, and its enduring stories, became a symbol of this understanding, a living testament to the enduring power of memory, narrative, and human connection. As Gilgamesh settled into the rhythms of his kingdom once more, he began to act with a new sense of purpose. He reinforced the city walls not merely for protection, but as a symbol of endurance. He shared wisdom gained from his travels, guiding his people with insight tempered by humility and experience. In the quiet moments, he would walk along the river, reflecting on the vast journey that had transformed him, understanding that while the gods had withheld true immortality, they had granted something equally profound: the comprehension of life itself, in all its fleeting, beautiful, and transient glory. The story of Gilgamesh's return, told and retold through generations, would echo the same lessons he had learned on his epic journey. Mortality, loss, friendship, and the quest for meaning became the threads from which human understanding was woven. Gilgamesh, once a king defined by ambition, emerged as a figure defined by wisdom, a living reminder that even in the shadow of death, life could be embraced fully, and that the legacy of experience and story could transcend time itself. As Gilgamesh settled back into life in Uruk, the epic of his journey began to reveal deeper layers that extended far beyond the simple tale of a king and his friend. The story was full of symbols, enigmas, and hidden meanings, whispering secrets that had been encoded over millennia, waiting for someone with the insight to perceive them. Each episode of his journey, from the wildness of Enkidu to the terrifying presence of Humbaba, from the divine wrath of the gods to the fleeting promise of the plant of rejuvenation, was more than a literal adventure. It was a map of the human soul, a reflection of the struggles and truths that shape existence itself. To understand Gilgamesh, one had to look not only at the events of the epic, but at the symbols woven into the narrative, the threads that connected mortality, wisdom, and the pursuit of transcendence. The walls of Uruk, which he had built and walked along countless times, took on a new significance in this light. They were not merely defensive structures, but metaphors for human aspiration and civilization itself. The meticulous bricks, each placed by countless hands, symbolized the collective effort of generations striving to leave a mark on the world, to resist the relentless erasure of time. In contrast, The forests, rivers, and mountains he traversed represented the untamed forces of nature and the unknown, domains where humans were small, vulnerable, and dependent upon insight, courage, and respect for the balance of the world. The tension between civilization and wilderness mirrored the inner tension within every human, between ambition and humility, desire and restraint, mortality and the longing for eternity. Humbaba, the monstrous guardian of the cedar forest, was more than a literal threat. He was the embodiment of nature's power, the hidden knowledge that the unprepared or hubristic could not face. His terrifying presence served as a warning that some truths and forces were not meant to be conquered lightly, that arrogance before the natural or divine order could bring devastation. Enkidu, the wild man, became a symbol of the raw, instinctual side of humanity, a connection to the earth and the primal rhythms that civilization often seeks to suppress. His friendship with Gilgamesh was therefore not only a narrative of companionship, but a metaphorical balance between intellect and instinct, the conscious and the unconscious, the civilized and the wild. Even the gods themselves, who intervened so frequently in the tale, were symbols layered with meaning. Ishtar's capriciousness, the sending of the bull of heaven, and the divine punishments meted out for human actions all reflected the delicate dance between free will and fate, between human striving and cosmic law. The gods were mirrors of human consciousness, embodying both aspiration and limitation, desire and consequence. Their presence in the epic reminded every listener that the forces governing life are both within and beyond us, intertwined with our decisions, and yet incomprehensible in their totality. The recurring motifs, plants, rivers, mountains, beasts, and cities, were themselves repositories of esoteric wisdom. The plant of rejuvenation, for instance, symbolized the fleeting nature of life and the impossibility of grasping eternal youth, serving as a metaphor for the transient gifts of existence. The river he crossed to reach Utnapishtim represented not just a physical barrier, but the liminal space between mortality and immortality, the threshold through which one must pass to gain insight, if not eternal life. Each element of the epic was meticulously crafted to reflect psychological, spiritual, and philosophical truths, encoded in a story that could survive the erosion of centuries. Scholars and mystics throughout history have suggested that the Epic of Gilgamesh contains hidden teachings, cryptic messages about the human condition, the cycles of life and death, and even hints at forgotten technologies or knowledge lost to time. The flood narrative, for example, might be more than a myth. It could be a symbolic record of cataclysmic events, warning of the power of nature and the consequences of hubris. Some interpretations propose that the epic was a manual for initiation, a guide for understanding the self and the universe, designed to be accessible to storytellers and dreamers while hiding deeper meanings for those attuned to its subtleties. The journey itself, with its progression from companionship to loss, from adventure to despair, and ultimately to reflection, mirrors the journey of every human being. Life is a series of challenges, trials, and encounters that shape understanding. The epic encourages a contemplation of mortality not as a source of fear, but as a lens through which meaning emerges. Even Gilgamesh's failure to secure literal immortality carries profound instruction, that wisdom, insight, and legacy are the true forms of enduring life. Stories, memory, and human influence ripple through generations, leaving an imprint far more lasting than flesh or wealth. In examining the epic through this esoteric lens, one can perceive subtle patterns of initiation and transformation. Gilgamesh begins as a king defined by pride and desire, encounters forces that challenge his understanding, confronts the realities of death and the limits of human power, and returns as a man tempered by insight. Every encounter, every symbol, Every obstacle is part of a carefully structured narrative designed to guide reflection and self-awareness. The epic is therefore both a tale of adventure and a profound meditation on existence, encoded with wisdom that transcends the centuries. By contemplating the symbols, the mysteries, and the hidden meanings of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one gains not just an understanding of an ancient story, but a mirror of human experience itself. Mortality, ambition, friendship, loss, and legacy are interwoven into a narrative that continues to resonate with every generation. The story whispers that while life may be finite, understanding, memory, and the pursuit of wisdom are eternal. It is this enduring richness, layered in both narrative and symbolism, that elevates Gilgamesh from a king of legend to a timeless figure, a guide through the deepest questions of human existence, and a beacon for those who seek to comprehend the mysteries of life, death, and the elusive truths hidden in between. The story of Gilgamesh, though ancient and whispered across millennia, was almost lost to the sands of time. For centuries, the epic existed only in oral tradition, carried by storytellers, priests, and wandering travelers across Mesopotamia. As empires rose and fell, as cities were destroyed and rebuilt, and as languages evolved, much of this early knowledge vanished. Clay tablets were buried, libraries sacked, and the script of cuneiform, delicate and complex, faded from memory. What remained were fragments, whispers, and references embedded in other texts, tantalizing hints of a story that had once captivated the hearts and minds of an entire civilization. The survival of the Epic of Gilgamesh is a story in itself, a tale of rediscovery that rivals the drama of the narrative it preserves. It was not until the 19th century that the world would begin to glimpse the epic in its original form. Archaeologists excavating the ruins of Nineveh in modern-day Iraq uncovered the remains of the library of Ashurbanipal, an astonishing repository of knowledge from the ancient world. Among the thousands of clay tablets, broken and eroded, lay fragments of Gilgamesh's story, pieces of a puzzle nearly lost for 4,000 years. The thrill of discovery was immense. Scholars realized that they were holding the earliest known narrative of human civilization, a tale that predated even the Iliad and the Odyssey, a story that had shaped myths, legends, and literary traditions for generations, yet had remained hidden from modern understanding. Translating the tablets was no small task. The cuneiform script was complex, consisting of wedge-shaped impressions pressed into clay, often incomplete or worn away by time. Each fragment required painstaking analysis, reconstruction, and cross-referencing with other texts to rebuild the narrative. Scholars discovered that multiple versions of the epic existed, sometimes varying in details, sequence, or emphasis. This raised profound questions. Which version was closest to the original? How much had been lost? And how much could be reconstructed? The thrill of unearthing the epic was matched by the challenge of interpreting it accurately. And with every discovery, new mysteries emerged, as if the story itself resisted total comprehension. The rediscovery of Gilgamesh also revealed surprising connections to other ancient myths. The flood narrative, central to the story, bore striking similarities to tales found in the Hebrew Bible, as well as in Hindu, Greek, and later European myths. Scholars began to understand that Gilgamesh was not merely a Sumerian king's tale, but a foundational narrative influencing countless cultures and belief systems. The epic became a bridge across time, connecting civilizations that might never have interacted directly, yet shared common concerns: mortality, friendship, the quest for knowledge, and the fear and wonder inspired by forces beyond human control. Yet for all its rediscovery, the epic has remained shrouded in mystery. Some tablets were fragmented beyond repair, leaving gaps that scholars could only speculate about. Entire passages, potentially containing hidden meanings or secret teachings, may have been lost forever. Some researchers have even suggested that certain inconsistencies or repetitions in the text might have been deliberate, encoding messages for those attuned to subtle symbolic or spiritual truths. The story that reached the modern world is therefore both revelation and puzzle, part known, part lost, leaving the listener or reader to imagine what secrets remain hidden beneath layers of time, war, and decay. Archaeological discoveries did not stop in Nineveh. Additional sites across Mesopotamia, including Uruk, Uar, and Babylon, yielded fragments of Gilgamesh tablets, each piece shedding new light on the epic while deepening its mysteries. Some tablets contain previously unknown episodes, hints of rituals, or references to celestial events, suggesting that the epic was closely tied not only to culture and morality, but to observation of the natural and cosmic world. It became clear that Gilgamesh was more than a story. It was a repository of ancient knowledge, a bridge between myth, history, and perhaps even hidden science. Modern interpretations have attempted to reconcile the epic with historical realities. Scholars have sought evidence of an actual king Gilgamesh, comparing archaeological records with the mythic narrative. Some argue that he may have been a real ruler whose life became exaggerated into legend, while others suggest he was primarily symbolic, representing archetypes of power, ambition, and the human struggle against mortality. Either way, the rediscovery of the epic has reshaped our understanding of ancient Mesopotamia, providing insights into the culture, values, and worldview of one of the world's earliest civilizations. The epic's survival, and the painstaking work required to recover it, also raises broader questions about the fragility of knowledge and the role of human effort in preserving history. How much wisdom has been lost to fire, flood, conquest, and decay? How many other epics, stories, and insights remain buried, waiting for the right hands to uncover them? The story of Gilgamesh's rediscovery is itself a meditation on memory, legacy, and the human desire to grasp what is eternal, even in a world governed by impermanence. In the modern era, the Epic of Gilgamesh continues to captivate audiences not only as a literary masterpiece, but as a spiritual and philosophical guide. Its lessons on mortality, friendship, ambition, and the pursuit of wisdom resonate across cultures, times, and languages. The story reminds humanity that even in the face of loss, destruction, and the relentless passage of time, there are truths that endure, truths encoded in story, in memory, and in the shared experience of generations. The clay tablets of Nineveh may have been fragile, broken, and incomplete, but the epic they preserved speaks with a voice as powerful now as it did 4,000 years ago, echoing across time, inviting each listener to embark on the same journey of discovery, reflection, and understanding that Gilgamesh himself undertook. As Gilgamesh walked through the streets of Uruk, the golden light of dawn spilling over the walls he had helped to build, he felt the weight of all he had endured pressing gently upon him, not as a burden, but as a quiet revelation. His journey, which had begun in pride and ambition, had carried him through loss, despair, triumph, and insight, and now it left him standing at the threshold of a profound understanding. That mortality was not a curse to be escaped, but a truth to be embraced, a framework that gave meaning to every breath, every step, every choice. The city around him, vibrant and alive, seemed to pulse with the rhythm of this revelation. Life, in all its fragility and impermanence, was a gift not because it could last forever, but because it was fleeting. He remembered the laughter of Enkidu, the fierce courage that had burned so brightly in his friend, and the shock of his absence, a void that had catalyzed everything that followed. Death, sudden and inexorable, had been the ultimate teacher. It had shown Gilgamesh the limits of power and the inescapable law that binds all living things. Yet, paradoxically, it had also opened a door to understanding, revealing that immortality did not lie in escaping death, but in the traces one leaves behind, in the stories told, in the memories carried by others. Every wall of Uruk, every brick laid by countless hands, every child running through the streets was a testament to this principle. Life, though transient, was eternal in its echoes. The gods, once distant and capricious figures in his eyes, now seemed to Gilgamesh to represent the intricate balance of existence. They were forces not merely to be appeased, but understood, embodiments of the cosmic order, of laws beyond human control, and of the delicate equilibrium between ambition and humility. He understood that the gods had never intended immortality for mortals in the literal sense, because true eternity is not a gift of time, but a quality of wisdom and influence. The world, vast and beautiful, was a classroom, and mortality was its most rigorous instructor, teaching lessons that no human power could alter. As he reflected on the plant of rejuvenation, still vivid in his memory, Gilgamesh recognized the profound lesson it offered. The plant, plucked from the depths yet lost to a serpent in an instant, symbolized the fleeting opportunities and fragile treasures of life. It was a reminder that even the most extraordinary gifts are impermanent, that control is often an illusion, and that human desire, no matter how intense, must be tempered with patience, insight, and humility. In losing the plant, Gilgamesh did not find despair, but clarity. Life's true richness is measured not by what one can hold forever, but by the courage to seek, the wisdom to learn, and the grace to accept what is beyond one's grasp. His reflections turned to Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the Great Flood. Gilgamesh had met a man who had defied death, yet even Utnapishtim's immortality carried solitude and the weight of endless memory. The contrast was stark and illuminating. To live forever without the bonds of friendship, without the pulse of mortal experience, was a hollow existence. Mortality, in its brevity, imbued life with color, intensity, and urgency. Without the finite nature of existence, courage would be meaningless, joy would be dulled, and sorrow would lose its weight. The very boundaries imposed by death defined the beauty of living, and in this understanding, Gilgamesh found a deep and enduring peace. He thought again of Enkidu, the wild man who had been his companion, his mirror, and his teacher. Enkidu had embodied the instinctual, untamed forces of life, raw vitality, a connection to nature, and a fearless approach to existence. His death had been catastrophic, yet it had opened Gilgamesh's eyes to the profound interconnection of all things. Mortality was not just an individual truth. It was woven into the very fabric of society, of friendship, of community. In remembering his friend, in honoring his loss, Gilgamesh understood that love, memory, and shared experience are the closest mortals can come to immortality. Legacy is not written in stone alone, but in the hearts of those touched by one's actions. The walls of Uruk, which Gilgamesh now walked with renewed eyes, were more than bricks and mortar. They were symbols of human endeavor, markers of civilization, and the physical echoes of countless lives interwoven across generations. He had once viewed them as a testament to his own power, but now he saw them as a reflection of collective effort, of shared memory, and of the impermanence that gives shape to human aspiration. The stories carved in clay tablets, the songs sung around fires, the lessons passed from elders to children, all these were the real monuments to eternity. They were living proof that human influence can transcend individual mortality, that stories can endure, and that the spirit of a life fully lived is far greater than the fragile span of the body. Gilgamesh's thoughts turned inward as he contemplated his own role in the tapestry of history. He had once sought fame, strength, and eternal life as ends in themselves. He had chased glory and defied gods. Yet the journey had reshaped his understanding. True immortality, he realized, is not possession but comprehension, not domination but contribution. It is measured in the wisdom one imparts, the compassion one shows, the courage one exercises, and the memory one leaves behind. In guiding his people, in nurturing the city, and in passing down the story of his journey, Gilgamesh could touch eternity not through magical means, but through the living legacy of his deeds. The city, alive with the hum of daily life, became a mirror of this revelation. Children's laughter, the haggling of merchants, the distant hammering of builders on new walls, all were reminders that life continues in cycles, that every generation builds upon the last, and that mortality is woven into the very structure of existence. By accepting this, Gilgamesh found a profound serenity. Death was no longer an enemy, but a teacher. The finite nature of life gave meaning to every choice, intensity to every experience, and value to every bond. To live fully in the face of inevitable end was the ultimate triumph. In quiet moments, Gilgamesh would gaze upon the horizon, reflecting on the deserts he had crossed, the mountains he had scaled, and the river that had carried him to Utnapishtim. Each journey, each trial, each encounter had been a lesson not merely in endurance or courage, but in understanding the nature of existence itself. The epic he had lived through, now preserved in stories and memory, was a guide for all who would follow, a map of human desire, fear, grief, and ultimately, wisdom. Mortality, far from being a limitation, was the lens through which every human achievement, every love, and every act of courage gained its depth and significance. The gods, he realized, were not distant arbiters, but reminders of the order that shapes all things. Their will, inscrutable and often harsh, served to illuminate boundaries, to test ambition, and to reveal character. By navigating the forces of the divine and the natural world, Gilgamesh had acquired insight that could never have been granted through power alone. Knowledge of life, death, and human limitation was the real treasure, a gift more enduring than any plant, any magic, or any promise of literal immortality. In embracing this truth, Gilgamesh also came to understand that the pursuit of immortality was never truly about the self. It was about connection to people, to place, to memory, and to story. The epic itself, surviving through clay tablets, fragments, and oral tradition, bore witness to the enduring human desire to reach beyond the limitations of mortality. Through reflection, action, and narrative, humanity touches eternity in ways far more profound than the extension of the body. To live fully, to care deeply, and to leave wisdom and compassion behind. These are the keys to a lasting legacy, a kind of immortality that no flood, no serpent, and no passage of time could erase. Gilgamesh understood, finally, that the epic he had lived and the lessons he had learned were themselves eternal. The story, retold across generations, carried forward the insights he had gained about the fragility of life, the power of friendship, the inevitability of loss, and the transcendent meaning found in memory and legacy. Each listener, each reader, each storyteller would carry these truths onward, making the impermanent permanent in a way that surpassed any attempt to cheat death. As he walked through the city, past children at play, merchants shouting, and builders hammering at the walls, Gilgamesh felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The journey had been perilous, filled with monsters, gods, floods, and serpents, yet had delivered him to a wisdom far greater than mere survival or conquest. He had learned that life's fleeting nature does not diminish its beauty, it enhances it. Each sorrow, each triumph, each fleeting moment contributes to a legacy that cannot be measured in years alone. And in that realization, he achieved the ultimate form of immortality, not in the body, not in the defiance of death, but in understanding, in memory, and in the stories that endure. The Epic of Gilgamesh, in this light, is more than a tale of kings and gods. It is a meditation on the human condition, a reflection on mortality, a guide for understanding the fleeting and precious nature of existence. Every brick in Uruk's walls, every fragment of clay inscribed with cuneiform, every story passed from parent to child, carries the same lesson. That life, in all its impermanence, holds within it a form of eternity, waiting to be recognized, embraced, and shared. Gilgamesh's journey ends not with conquest of death, but with the triumph of wisdom, insight, and legacy. A reminder that the true immortality of humanity lies not in living forever, but in living fully, consciously, and meaningfully, and in leaving behind echoes that endure long after our bodies have returned to dust.